Welcome back to Nonsense, I'm Chris, and Mortgully the Last Rickforest was the best episode possibly ever, definitely so far this season, at least in my opinion. The early reviews are also really strong. This season is insane, 7 for 7, so I'm calling it. This is going to be a perfect season. There's no way to jinx it now, so let's break the episode down, starting with the title, which is a reference to Ferngully the Last Rainforest, an awesome movie that aside from being in a magical forest where a bad guy winds up trapped in a tree, has nothing to do with the plot of the episode, which actually references elements from so many movies. Lion King, Interstellar, Pocahontas, Shawshank Redemption, definitely Spore the game, and possibly Evolution, just because of the 3-eye guy and the whole going from amoebas to mammals thing. Basically the same reason it's related to Spore. It's weak though, and I'll point out the other stronger ones out when we get to them. The episode opens on a planet next to a black hole, which is the main area where they're pulling from Interstellar, which is the most famous property that has used gravitational time dilation, a real phenomenon predicted by the general theory of relativity, to have a character spend years on a planet next to a black hole while only hours passed for the people on Earth. Which is what happens here. They are trapped for what is clearly years, possibly centuries or millennia, and at the end, Summer says,
"Where have you two been all day?"
Not that this is new for them, they've experienced a litany of different kinds of time dilation, but they fly over some very Earth-like forest. Rick's got a vague scanner screen up on the planet. We pan down to see some mildly alien plant life. This one's got a bug in it, which is cool. They do this awesome transition from the ship having flown off screen to them suddenly hoofing it through the forest with a handheld scanner and energy machetes. They reach the giant tree Rick was scanning for and start harvesting the primo sap they're here for. A classic setup for the series. Rick takes Morty to get some valuable substance and then something goes wrong. Describes like 20% of all the episodes. But the tree wraps its vines around them and pulls them up to its face, calling them spacefarers and indicating he doesn't like those. The tree itself is obviously like the Pocahontas tree. That and the entire living off the land theme they wind up landing on are the big Pocahontas nods. Anyways, it says spacefarers consume their planets and then spread their disease to other stars, explaining why he doesn't like them, although we learn at the end he feeds off of his little microbiome's deaths. And since he also says this entire planet was his retirement plan, he must also be a spacefarer, plus he's torturing all these people, so he is a hypocrite, although he is also right, because everyone here but Morty was here for resources. But anyways, the tree drags them underground where they suddenly have a visible aura around them. Blue for Rick, yellow for Morty. The tree absorbs them and 2 little orbs fly out of their disintegrating bodies. It's a long and cool sequence, but I went inch by inch, frame by frame, and there's no extra detail as they descend into the hollow planet, which seems to get its light from the energy orbs flowing up into the tree and seems to go on for a while. Their orbs get dumped out of a root and into this body of water where they morph into amoeba, and Morty freaks out, but Rick says the sap is worth it, revealing that it's a drug. This guy approaches them, describing the place as a prison. The voice actor is also doing his best Morgan Freeman impression, and they gave him his freckles out of a reference to Morgan Freeman's Shawshank Redemption, which takes place in a prison like this, and has a similar escape to that scene with Morty. He explains there's no way out. This amoeba is doing curls. He does a Morgan Freeman style monologue about prison life before suddenly attacking Morty, killing him. Rick goes in this first time with just a big lump which fails as a weapon. This guy's new arm is spiral tipped, which is sick. They reincarnate though, and Rick learns from his failed club shape, this time opting for like a sharp hook tip to tear through the guy's body, calling him a spawn camper like in any PvP shooter where annoying people just wait aiming down sights at the spawn sites. But Rick kills him and they eat his body before we see them apply this world's rules. You can willpower your own evolution, which is an amazing concept. I love it. They evolve up to fish and climb ashore, evolved into amphibious species. Rick loves breathing air finally, but Morty, being a lungfish which has both gills and lungs, can't figure out how to breathe as they walk through the forest. There's a snake and a sneaky creature watching them. We get a funny circle of life bit to make Morty nervous. Another couple sneaky guys watch as Rick gets annoyed Morty is suffocating. He winds up dying, and it's a recurring bit they do during this compilation where Morty can't fully adapt to the new body and it keeps killing them. For half a second at the beginning of this compilation, Rick looks confused as he watches a bunch of flies who seem to be flying to the middle for some reason. They never do anything with that, but Morty can't use his body well enough to not stick to the webs, plus he doesn't do what Rick does and real spiders do, which is try to only use the scaffolding parts of the web, which they use non-stick silk before. But Morty tries to pull himself off of it using Rick, which obviously leads to them getting trapped. So a fly makes a great joke for the 90% of you who know flies like feces.
Not so fun, is it? It should. I'm gonna.
They respawn again, this time making it to birds. Again, in all these environment shots, I do go frame by frame, there just aren't any noteworthy details back there for these scenes. Rick says being a bird is like astral projection, because you can go anywhere but can't do anything without hands. Say that to nests. But the tree kills them, and then we get a Lion King reference in how they do this little montage. Rick says they're gonna need to make some tech, and Morty is happy to have hands again. Afterwards, they head to a watering hole for apes, which makes them hostile, but Rick kills a bunch of them and the leader to take control of them. But not before Morty dies, Rick saying this time he'll find him once he has a way out. So Morty respawns on his own, and this time is greeted by the guy who winds up marrying number 3 hyena/gorilla. He basically tells Morty in a very preachy way to submit to nature and just be part of the life cycle, because that's how the warden, aka the tree, will let them leave. We then see Morty as a bee, pollinating and working in the hive, where the others keep saying this kind of natural work will please the warden enough to get them out stuff. But suddenly a giant gorilla with a satchel, meaning he's working for Rick, breaks the hive and collects the honey, killing Morty and his new friends, who respawn saying to just jump back into their next animal so they can get closer to being free. Which is a good spot to talk about one of the underlying themes here, which is obviously exploitation, one of many themes they take on in this episode, because we eventually learn that the tree actually wants everyone to constantly be dying because it's how he feeds on them. It's what the orbs and the roots are, and there's this fanatical base that insists that in order to be free, they just have to keep being part of nature no matter how uncomfortable it is. We later see that fraternization between predator species and prey species isn't allowed by this weird religion either, and as long as they don't try to escape, which always requires supposedly unnatural behavior, the warden doesn't kill them himself, which is somehow positive, despite dying all the time. And when one of them manages to make it back out through perfectly natural means by being the only prisoner to choose to become plant life, and he even assumes that the lesson was to respect nature and that now he is free, but the tree says no, there's no lesson, he's still prisoner because the tree gets fed every time someone dies, so it's just pure exploitation. The tree is not better than anyone, and this isn't even his original planet, and the odds are he's accused spacefarers of draining their planets because he did that himself. Anyways, we cut to a buffalo dead in a hole with some gorillas tricking some wolves into going after it, only to trap them and tell them they work for Rick now. We cut to Rick's camp around the base of the tree where he's drinking fermented berry wine and says it's time to launch the attack. We see a slave blacksmith making a base for a wagon. Rick tells all the slaves that they're gonna die trying different methods of escape so he can study it, and this is Gorilla 3, later Hyena 3, who winds up married to the religious guy Morty's hanging out with right now. I also love the turtle shell shoulder pads. He makes it some way up but dies to acid, which Rick writes down on his stone tablet before ordering everyone else to try to climb as well. One guy gets launched into the tree's hole? Another guy crashes an aerial screw like Da Vinci drew. Since nothing works, Rick tries cutting it down instead, which does finally get the tree's attention, who moves its face down to confront them, regrowing itself over the saw and breaking the wagons pushing the saw. Rick then tries burning it, but it just makes it rain. We cut back to Morty, who's now a clam with his friends, and they do a little compilation of several animals as Morty keeps commenting that all they ever do is eat shit or make shit. During the compilation, they do this time skip that seems to imply that possibly thousands of years have passed by. Morty becomes more and more disenchanted with just going with the flow like the other prisoners. Finally, as a turtle, Morty has too many doubts despite his friend reminding him following nature's path over and over without question is how they please the warden. He responds,
"A reformed prisoner is someone who doesn't want to leave the prison?"
Which is commentary, not on the prison system exclusively, but on basically any system, including some prisons mainly for profit prisons, but it's much more general commentary, continuing the perfect metaphor that the modern economy is essentially built around this type of relationship between a company and its employees. Most working class people, yeah, in America, but also across the globe today, are just stuck eating shit day in and day out so that someone much more powerful and in control can get more power and control. All the while, that power is usually telling them in order to have the same degree of freedom as them, they have to keep their head down and eat that shit like you're thrilled to do so, dangling the hope of a better life somewhere vaguely in the future in front of us as our only motivator. It's a strong commentary for sure, and the grandiose nature of the world is a perfect metaphor for the almost religious nature of most workplace cultures today. So holier than thou, and the guy convincing you to keep eating shit is usually eating just as much shit as you.
Well, you know where to find us. We'll be eating shit.
So Morty decides he'd like to finish this life on his own. His friend says to rejoin them whenever he wants, and they part ways. He got the idea after seeing a vegetable to be vegetation, and nobody else has ever been vegetation, so he wants to try. He starts as an algae bloom and transitions in this beautiful long shot through a million different plants, slowly overtaking the entire area as plant life, and growing slowly up the tree as bodies continue falling and stacking up. Another perfect metaphor because we see him feeding a bunch of animals and stuff, so instead of eating each other, he's more focused on supporting each other and growing a network. Just a different way to interact with the world. I think younger generations are kind of like that. Like, a lot of jobs ask you to take advantage of people, and younger generations, they just don't want to do that anymore. Or at least I feel like a smaller percentage of the younger generations want to do that kind of stuff. And he represents another type of lifestyle, a community supportive lifestyle. It's just great commentary on the difference between Morty's personality and Rick's personality. Presumably though, this is happening over at least years, possibly decades, and he finally makes it back up to the top side of the planet, right next to the tree's face. They have this great revealing little back and forth.
So many nutrients in the soil up here.
The life cycles of the guilty provide nourishment.
But that's more of a byproduct than the point of all this, right?
So he knocks Morty back down, killing him, not just that part of Morty, but all of Morty. Rick is watching it happen, and in the transition, there's this minor continuity error with the gorilla not being there before the cut. Rick dies though in order to restart alongside Morty again. He says he has an idea and grows into like a caveman before singing part of the Lion King Circle of Life song to a crowd of animals. Morty has grown back into plant life, and he asks everyone to eat his vegetation instead of each other in order to starve the tree of death. They move into a giant cave where Rick uses Morty as a staff, love that, also kinda Lion King-y. Everyone eats off of Morty as they do a time skip to show the outside world go barren without everyone out there eating each other. Is the commentary too obvious yet? Gorilla 3 and Religious Guy fall in love in a literal garden of Morty. We see they've started restaurants and become true chefs. Rick and Morty officiate Gorilla 3 and Religious Guy's wedding. The tree finally realizes it has to do something. He finds them in the cave and demands they start eating each other again, but finds the message, "Get bent." I think that's a tree joke, I just can't figure out how. But it turns out Morty was hiding everyone with plants, and they launch a surprise attack, harpooning the tree and anchoring it with Morty, getting him in the eye while a flanking team gets him at the base. They finally manage to tear him down, and he begs them to go back to eating each other as nature intended. He then tries to appease them by saying he didn't destroy anyone's ships, also setting up how everyone else gets off the planet for the post-credit scene. He finally dies, and they do this great bit where everyone asks how they're getting turned back into their regular bodies. Rick says to close their eyes so the magic can happen, and then sneaks away on a hot air balloon. We cut to them flying away and see that they took a bunch of the sap like Rick wanted. Cut to them back to normal. Summer asks where they've been all day, and they make a joke about Morty having learned nothing about biology. After the credits, we see Rick and Morty run into Gorilla 3, who made it off planet, but they pretend not to know him. We then see that he's still married to Religious Guy, which is cute. And that's all for this episode. An absolute banger, and I am calling it. This will be a perfect season. With 3 episodes left, this is already the best season since season 2, and it gives me strong hopes for the President Curtis spin-off, which is premiering right after the season finale. Check out my trailer breakdown for that if you're interested. It's the same creative team. I'll definitely be breaking it down as the episodes come out, so make sure to subscribe. Please leave anything I missed in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.